believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm back. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Vrendas, also known as Ricky Vrendas, and a great episode for you today. Today we have returning guest, dear friend MEL from the MEL Show. If you haven't checked out the MEL Show, please do. She's on Rumble. She's on a lot of different platforms. I'll put all the links in the show description, so please check her out. I know many of you will be familiar with her because she has been on the show a few times, and she's also a regular on the Union of the Unwanted, my other show I host with Sam Tripoli, Charlie Robinson, and Midnight Mike from the OBDM show. Today we talk politics, current events, history, and much more, so I'm sure you're going to enjoy this conversation. But before we get into that conversation, let me remind you this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of the discussions I bring to you, please consider giving some value back. You can rate the show, review the show, subscribe to the show on all the platforms I'm on. And I'm on just about all the video platforms minus YouTube. I did start a Clips channel recently. You can subscribe to that. But if you want to see the full versions of all my episodes, check out the Ripple Effect Podcast on Rumble, Odyssey, Float, Band.video, and many more. And the audio is available on all the major platforms. I have recently received some feedback about possibly being censored or suppressed on Spotify. And every once in a while, I have these issues with Spotify or iTunes. And even recently, I had issues with my website URL, and I believe it's fixed now and it's all working. But if you ever have any issues, please go to rickyvrands.com or the rippleeffectpodcast.com. They both bring you to the same website. For some reason, I never have any issues with rickyvrands.com. That your URL always seems to work. So go there and find all the places you can find my shows and audio and all that stuff. So just in case you're struggling to find my show or you have any issues with any of the podcast apps or video platforms, go to the website and you can find all the locations. And I'll always be available on Band.video and Odyssey and Rockfin. Those platforms have never censored any of my stuff. And you can also use Podcast Addict if you have an Android, and you can get the audio directly from my feed. So you don't have to worry about censorship if you use Podcast Addict. Now let's quickly talk about the ways you can financially support the show. If you're in a good financial situation, please consider checking out our merch store at the Ripple Effect Podcast. Merch.com will bring you there, or you can find a link on my website. You can also check out the Ripple Effect Podcast on Rockfin, like I mentioned, and just by watching and streaming the Ripple Effect Podcast on Rockfin, you're supporting the show, and they give you the ability to tip the content creator. So if there's a specific episode you enjoy, you can tip the content creator for that episode. So please check out Rockfin. All the Ripple Effect Podcast video episodes are free on Rockfin, so please check that out. You can also support us financially on Patreon. So if you want to send as little as $1 a month on Patreon, it would be very much appreciated. And for donating as little as $1 a month, you can be a part of our Patreon podcast, which is a podcast I do with my Patreon supporters roughly every 4 to 6 weeks. My Patreon supporters and I get together on a Zoom call. We chat about whatever we want to talk about, and I release it as a full episode. So it's a great way to get on the show and a great way of supporting the show. You can also make a one-time donation by sending us Bitcoin, Ethereum, or you can send us a one-time donation to our Venmo account. And the last couple ways of supporting the show is checking out our sponsors. One is Content Safe. Matt from Content Safe saves me tons of hours of uploading time by syncing all my video channels on all the different platforms I'm on together. I upload to one channel, and then shortly after you will find that video, thumbnail, description, all that stuff on all my other channels. If you're a streamer, podcaster, YouTuber, contact Matt from Content Safe. Let him know you're a listener of the podcast, and he'll definitely hook you up. Also, check out the University of Reason and the Autonomy courses created by Richard Grove, the host of Grand Theft World podcast. If you feel like life isn't too mentally stimulating, or if you want to connect with a liberty-minded community, or you want to just learn some new skills or expand on skills you already have, check out the University of Reason and the autonomy courses. And by doing so, you can help support the Ripple Effect podcast and help yourself at the same time. And my last sponsor is Element Electrolytes. It's one of my favorite sponsors because it's something I've been using for a long time. It was created by somebody that I've been following and a fan of for a long time, Rob Wolf, who's also been on my podcast and really just about every big podcast that focuses on health and nutrition. He is also the author of the book called Sacred Cow and the documentary of the same title. And if you've watched any documentary about food and what we should be eating, you've probably seen Rob Wolf in it. And with all these years of research, he figured out that a lot of our symptoms we're dealing with, especially when we're doing a keto or paleo type of diet or we're fasting, is due to dehydration. So he created a healthy, great tasting way to stay hydrated, and it's called Element Electrolytes. It's just a powder you put in your water. It tastes amazing. It'll keep you in fasting. It'll keep you in ketosis if that's what you're doing. There's no artificial colors or flavors. It's sweetened with only stevia, and it gives you all the potassium, magnesium, and sodium you need to optimize your cognitive ability and your physical ability. So you might have headaches, muscle fatigue, muscle soreness, low energy, and you might not realize that it's a simple solution to help with some of those symptoms, and that's staying hydrated. But staying hydrated is difficult because most of the things on the market are full of artificial sweeteners, or they're full of sugar, or they have a bunch of ingredients you don't really need. And Element Electrolytes has enough of the sodium, potassium, magnesium that will actually make a difference, because dosage is important. Some people don't realize that when you look at nutritional facts of a drink or supplement, that it might have the stuff you're looking for or the stuff you need, but it might not have enough of it where it makes an impact. So that's important too. So check out Element Electrolytes. Please use my link so that way you can stay hydrated and support the Ripple Effect podcast. And every time you use that link, you'll get a free gift with every purchase. So thanks again, guys, for listening to the Ripple Effect podcast. Enjoy this amazing conversation with Mel K, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
In Nashville, and we were talking about how great Union of Lemont is. I wish it was the biggest show. It'd do a lot more for our country if people realize we all can all meet in the middle.
Yeah, it is a awesome show. It was funny because we did that show with so many different personalities at the height of like conflict in regards to like civilians fighting and arguing. It was during the COVID time, during the election time, when typically most people didn't get along and couldn't discuss anything civilly. So it was just one of those things where the show was so necessary that
I know
people have just civil discussions, and it's like you can disagree and realize that you're still on the same team. And the divide and conquer thing is just, we constantly keep saying it in the alternative media community, but it happens over and over again. And if it's not this topic, it's the next topic. You know, look at climate change. Same thing. Like, people are getting very passionate, and it's becoming a religion where it's like, how dare you don't believe in this? How dare, and it's like, even if I believed that we're having a serious, possibly fatal impact on this earth, and I'm sure we're obviously we pollute,
Yes.
we're having a negative impact under, but not. I still wouldn't trust the people in power to correct it. I couldn't say like, hey, let me just give up some freedoms. Sure, tax me to death. Sure, let's invest in some company that you probably are in business with behind closed doors, and you'll fix the problem. It's like they cannot be trusted. So I think there's some people who do their hearts in the right place. They're people who truly believe this stuff, and they're people who think that, like, okay, well, I think that we are having a negative impact on the earth. Like, how do we fix this? Well, if this politician's saying he'll help fix this, then that's who I'm rooting for. So, but we live, it's like topic after topic. If you were looking for a break in the news to find like, you know what, let me just disconnect like there's never a break. There's always it's chaos all the
It's
time.
total, and they're throwing it at us. You know what I've been thinking though, more and more. First of all, as far as climate change, the current people that are pushing the climate agenda, the climate crisis, all those people are the same 10 billionaires that are involved at the very top, you know, and then the oligarchy, trillionaire, billionaire, multinational corporation class that are demanding that all of our nations give them the money to fix climate change when they're the ones causing it, really, and not climate change, pollution, what they're doing all over Africa, all over South America, you know, and they would like us to transfer all of our wealth, which is what that really is, to them, and then trust them to fix it. And if you look at what they're doing, where the truth of the matter is, we're at a point where even the UN is, to me, a total fraud, and all of their groups that are involved in all of this stuff, IPCC, the World Health Organization, all the whole globalist regime is being looked at, I think, pretty closely. And we're going to need to in this going forward, which is why I love the union, because we can all figure out how to do this. But honestly, the people need to dismantle this idea that that's the way forward. They've been developing countries for 45 years, and those countries have not developed by design. So, you know, we have the tools, we have the technology, we have the ability to have clean water, clean air, great food, thriving farms everywhere on planet Earth if people wanted that. But the powers that be and the money and the IMF and all these manipulation tactics of the globalist multinational corporation, public-private partnership, they don't want that, and they never did, and it just goes back to Rockefeller, and it's all very clear to most people. But the one thing I like what you're saying about more than that is the tactic of divide and conquer, because the bottom line is if people took a step back and looked at everything they're dividing us by, like whenever they're talking about you know, hate crime legislation, human rights for, you know, legislation, any legislation for any minority group, any of that, what they're really talking about is taking more and more of our freedom and destroying more and more of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights under the guise of helping a small group of people that they don't even care about. Because what you see, at least with Black Lives Matter, a very obvious example, nothing's gotten better for the Black community. In fact, it's gotten far worse. So the people that are manipulating us, and then, you know, the Women's March, I don't even know what that was about. But those people are dividing us in a way that is so deceptive, because all they're doing is then legislating to make the government more powerful, bigger, and closer to a communist regime. So as long as we play, and you're right, a lot of people, they have empathy, they have compassion. The low-level players don't even know that. The people that don't know their NGO is run by the same people that are, as Charlie would call it, running the controlled demolition of America, think they're doing good, and all they're doing is keeping us, you know, docile and divided.
Well, look at the recent Memphis beating, the fatal beating that those police officers did. Every headline is about a Black man who, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I actually watched some of the video that was morning from another angle. And because I honestly, there's so much of that going on all the time that I'm like, okay, let me wait and kind of take a step back before I really dive deep into it, because there might be another story right around the corner before, you know, and so you never, there's, and like we were saying, there's so much going on daily that's like you can't invest a whole bunch of time in every single story or you'll go crazy, and you just don't have that much time. But I'm like, okay, they're still talking about this. Or, you know, it's funny, one thing that you never see, like every headline, and I was watching some videos this morning, it was like just disgusting. I mean, the video, but one thing the headlines leave out over and over again is that all 5 officers were Black.
Right.
It's like it just goes back to the divide and conquer thing. It's like all they're doing is they're purposely just getting the public mad at each other and causing conflict and causing, you know, ridiculous debate. And it's like, okay, well, how can you even consider this a race thing? I mean, you could consider it a cop thing. You can say, hey, you know what, like we need to do a better job of who we're hiring and who we're giving this power to, which that's a conversation I'd be more than happy to listen to and be a part of. And I think it is an important discussion, because police officers do have it's almost an impossible job. I mean, you have so much stress. You have, I mean, the divorce rate for police officers, and I have a lot of police officer friends, like it's ridiculous. It's almost like an ongoing joke. Like most police officers are divorced. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it requires so much of your time, so much of your energy, and there's so much stress involved that it's almost impossible to have any normal outside life. And, everything else will sacrifice because of it. And but those are the conversations, those are the headlines that we should be reading about, like, okay, well, is this job really stressful? Should they be working less jobs? Should we maybe hire more cops so we don't have super stressful jobs? Maybe we should also look at, like, who are we hiring? The thing is, too, is, I always say this, like, there's shithead people everywhere. And there's shithead people at Mickey D's. There's shithead people at, not that I eat there, but I'm assuming there's some shithead people who work there. I mean, there's every line of work, there's going to be shithead people. And that shithead person might decide to be a cop. He might decide to be a doctor. He might decide to be whatever. And so it's like, we also need to figure out, like, okay, is this just a bad, shitty person who was a bad, shitty person, maybe even previously to getting a badge and a gun, and that just made it worse? Or, is it a cop issue? And again, like, these are the discussions we should be having, not like, hey, another, black man. It's like, but by other black men. It's like, if a Asian cop beat up a Asian person, like they wouldn't be calling it Asian crime. It's like, to me, it's obvious that they're leaving certain details out on purpose.
Yeah, actually, there's two shootings, Asian on Asian crime last week in California. The media immediately said that it was Asian hate, which is the bottom line about all of this is that we have to start understanding that there is a concerted effort by what I call the oligarchy, billionaire, trillionaire class that has usurped this nation, that is funneling and funding all of this. Van Jones, who came out on CNN and said that this was even though it was black cops, so he says it's black cops, but it's still about systematic racism and racism. And, Jeff Bezos gave him $100 million last year to promote different things through his lens. And a lot of these people, we really got to look at who's pulling the strings at this point, because people are being used. Like you said, they have compassion, they have empathy, but they are being used. And as far as with the cops, what I've realized is they purged a lot of cops, first of all. But right now, the hiring process, I was talking to General Flynn about this too in the military. The hiring process, the recruiting process is including this bogus diverse equity inclusion and kind of these surveys you have to take to even get to the next level of being hired. So, and this is like, God forbid it happens, but the Biden regime's education secretary, there shouldn't even be that department, but has put in something where they want to put 60,000 counselors in K through 12 schools all over the country. And all of these counselors are picked by diversity, equity, inclusion, and these pre-hire surveys that judge their anti-racism. And so if we're hiring at the core people that are being picked because of their inherent bias and things that should have nothing to do with merit or who's the best person for the job or any of that. All of this stuff should have been knocked out because of the civil rights laws of the 60s. But we're back at a place where they're purposefully hiring these people, I believe, for the police force, for the military, that they can not only control, but that they somehow are taking some kind of behavioral, who knows what's it, we got Cass Sonstein back up there and other people that are really into behavior control and manipulation and this like 5th generation warfare stuff. So they are now hiring these people based on criteria that is very different than what we've had in the past, and is honestly, I believe, targeted, just like with Mao or with Hitler or with Stalin or any of them, to work for the state. They're not protecting we the people. That's not their job anymore. And a lot of those 5 cops, they were hired after they changed all the rules. And we, the people of the United States, first of all, I've come a long way in my journey. There is no left and right, Republican and Democrat. I don't believe that at all. I believe that there is a uniparty that has been picked and placed by the I call it the American oligarchy, but the billionaire trillionaire class that run all the NGOs that are aligned with the globalist, agenda, that really believe that the nation state of America should cease to exist. They are destroying us from the inside out. A lot of it has to do with what's going on with defund the police and all of this. And at the end of the day, we, the people of the United States, can push back, and we're not. And that's a really scary thing because, like I said, this thing coming up with what they're going to do with our kids. I was talking to a child psychiatrist yesterday that's read this. I sent it to her, the executive order, and she said, so they're going to hire people that are, pro transgender transition. And in this executive order about what they're putting into the classroom. So they already did it to the cops and the military. Now they're doing it to our students in public education. And these are going to be able to put kids on drugs, recommend transition and puberty blockers and all of that, and also somehow diffuse crime and violence. And if you look at who they're hiring and their criteria, it's another diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory hiring process. And this is what's happening to our country. And this guy's pushing executive orders that are not only dumbing down this nation inside out, but also putting our children and our lives in danger by putting incompetent people who truly do not belong in those jobs, in those positions. And, I look back to, when it comes to the cops, I look back to Obama when he said that they needed to be a civilian police force. And I think, is this the civilian police force that he was talking about?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And yeah, there was a Asian shooter in California. What did they? I didn't read the headlines, but I did read a little bit about the story. There were headlines that were saying that it was a Asian.
Oh yeah, like Karen Bass, who probably didn't win as in Los Angeles. She came out right away. Asian hate. Gavin Newsom, Asian hate. There were two shootings, one in a nightclub and one at a farm, both Asian on Asian crime. But the headline was immediately Asian hate crime. And then, of course, what they do, because this is really what it's about, the people on the ground floor are not privy. What it's really about is then they want to propose legislation, anti-Asian hate legislation, black hate legislation. I mean, that crazy person I can't believe who's in our government, but that Sheila Jackson Lee wanted to put out a bill against even criticizing anyone that's black as a white supremacy incitement bill. It's just everything that they're saying that they want to do to help these groups is really about giving this totalitarian captured regime more and more power and taking away more and more of our individual liberty. You cannot legislate how people feel. I have friends that I know are probably racist. Okay. They won't say it to you, but you hear what people say. We were at a dinner one time and somebody we were sitting with, a lot of people say horrible things about Jews in front of me, horrible things about, different groups. But, there's some people that I know are racist. They are. But what can you do about it? Just don't be friends with them, don't entertain them, and shut it down. The government shouldn't be trying to do that. It's impossible. All of the government is doing, this government especially, but the uniparty, they're all in it together. I believe that it's the status, they're holding on tightly right now to the status quo on all levels to cover their own crimes of the last 50 years, which are many. But you can't legislate any of this stuff. And the more that they push this diversity, equity, inclusion, hiring in every aspect of our lives, the more they're dividing us through things that shouldn't matter. And at the same time, the quality of our workers, our children, our education system, our everything from top to bottom is being destroyed so that it's not rebuilt. So we really have to look into that, because I don't think that diversity to me isn't our strength. To me, it's what we have in common, regardless of color, race, gender, any of that. Equity is a race to the bottom, so everyone's equal, where equality is everyone has the opportunity to pursue their potential as they put in the effort. And inclusion just gives an out to get rid of people or deny people jobs or spaces in academia or wherever, based on arbitrary rules. And that we have so many infiltrators, and we have to look back to the Weatherman Underground times and how those people infiltrated academia, because I think a big thing that came out of these last few years is that the experts that we've trusted to mold these ideas, especially the ones in the think tanks, and the NGOs and the lobbyists, they're really the ones that are pulling the strings. The people that we've elected at this point, I believe, are just puppets and actors. And we need to look at who's really behind this, because I now call it the poison Ivy League. But if you trace a lot of this stuff, it comes right back to academia, and then you pull in Annie Jacobson and Operation Paperclip and how it got infiltrated. And you're going to see, I believe, that these people are all in it for the destruction of America, for a functioning globalist nation state scenario that they all believe benefits them. And in their hearts, they know that it's got nothing to do with helping America. It's got to do with the concentration of power in fewer and fewer hands, as we've seen slowly but surely happen. So, we have to start being honest with ourselves and our country.
Yeah, and the thing about the race thing is that, there's discrimination in every aspect of different religions, different colors, different there's in everything. Like, people are tribalistic, and
Right.
I mean, so I'm Portuguese, and if you're Italian, it has a similar type of thing where if you're Sicilian, and if you're from the mainland, it's like sometimes there's this, they look at each other like they're different types of people. They
Right.
discriminate against each other a little bit. Unless you're the only two Italians at the party, then you'll migrate towards each other. And it's same thing with
I know.
Portuguese, like Brazilians, for example. If we're at if there's a lot of Brazilians and a lot of Portuguese, then we'll be like, oh, Brazilians, they don't really have anything in common with us. And then it's like, if you're at a party and you meet a Brazilian, you're the only two people who speak Portuguese, and you're the only two people who understand that culture, then, you'll talk about your similarities, and you'll talk about soccer, you'll talk about food, whatever it may be. And but so there, that's, you see that everywhere. The Portuguese in the Azores, for example, like, sometimes we call them Portuguese, and sometimes we say, no, they're Azorians. They're not, they're not Portuguese. It's just like, and you see that. And,
Yeah.
the beautiful thing about like music and sports and, jobs, for example, like you were talking about, is that it's all based on your skill and your ability
Right.
to do the work. It's you look at like the Boston Celtics, which was known for being, a racist. Yeah, and during Bill Russell's time, it was. I mean, there's a lot of stories. There's a hilarious story about Red Auerbach getting a call from Bill Russell. They were like in the South playing, and the owner of the restaurant told the team, like, you guys can all eat here, but he can't. And they pointed Bill Russell. And and so the team's like, no, we're not eating here. So Bill
Right.
Russell calls Red Auerbach, and he's like, Red, what? He's all pissed, all angry. And Red Auerbach's like, he's like, calm down, calm down. I'll see what I can do. But he's like, hey, I'm Jewish. So he's like, I'm in the same boat. He's like, he's a, like, he understood that there's discrimination against his people too. So it's like, there is in Asian, same thing, right? There's like
Yeah.
hierarchies of Asians. Some people would say, oh, you got the Japanese, and then you got and Eastern Europeans. So you see that I remember that movie Crash from years ago. It was a perfect example of it. Like, you see the person being discriminated against also doing a little bit of discrimination. And so the truth about this stuff is that we're very tribalistic, and there's tons of different tribes. It's not just race. And you really can't put an end to it. We're going to migrate towards people that are similar to us. I've had conversations with people at the gym. This one black guy, real friendly with me, and we would talk all the time and debate all the time. We'd always have friendly debates, and he would openly say, he's like, I don't want my kids not marrying and having kids with somebody who's not black. And
Right.
I didn't find that like offensive.
That's what he believes. And we live in a country where individual liberty and what you believe inside should be respected, not tried to change by laws and manipulation and phony executive orders and stupid programs. Anti-racism, as this was brought out, really comes from the Black Congressional Caucus sends a bunch of their best historically Black college students to China to study Marxism. And a lot of it comes from that. But the bottom line is, the whole anti-racist movement is so racist and so ridiculous that they can talk about white people openly with such disdain and hatred. And a lot of times it's white liberal women that are the worst of the worst. And what's funny is, I grew up, outside of Philly. I didn't even, my growing up was so everything, every race, religion, that nobody was outweighing anyone. And then I went to school in New York City. So for me, like, I just, all I know is that I was always attracted to people that were like-minded, regardless of what they looked like or anything. And I have a couple Black friends in New York City that have really had it. They are upset about what's happening to their children in school. They are upset about, one of my friends is a single mother in the Bronx. There's no cops up there because of this nonsense. And also, if you talk to some of these people, they're going to say that there's tremendous racism within the Black community. There's a lot of racism and tribalism within the Jewish community. There's a lot of it in every community amongst themselves. So, it's really, it's just been manipulated in a way, I believe, to divide and conquer. I think at the end of the day, most people just want to be around like-minded folks that make them feel good, that they can work with and talk to, that their friends can be friends with their kids. And it really has very little to do with that on the personal level. But once you get into this divide and conquer, all I can say is we are in a situation where we, the people of the United States, I think the stakes are so high for this country right now, and we need to really just break through these barriers and understand that at the end of the day, most of us just want to live our lives, have the fruits of our labor come back to us, raise our children as we see fit, and have the government leave us alone and do their jobs. And this government that is legislating and making laws and passing stuff based on nonsense, race and women's rights and these rights and that rights, that's not their job, and that is our job as parents and citizens to do that. But left alone without the constant, and the media is the worst. And I believe the media, a lot is coming out about the media and big tech that I think they will be held accountable for what they've done to divide our nation like they have knowingly. But right now, like I did a show with Pasta, Combo Couch Pasta, and me, and so it was me. I don't consider myself a conservative anymore. I just consider myself somebody who believes in America and the Constitution, and I'm not sure what else. But it was me, a libertarian, a Marxist, him, so a liberal kind of. And we all talked about the debates, kind of like Union, but a smaller one. And at the end of it, we all just agreed that there were certain fundamental things that all of us want, regardless of our background. And it was basically what I just said, which was, to live your life in peace and have the government do their job, but stay out of my personal life. It's none of your business on every level. And that's where I just really think that's why I love your show, the other show, Union of the Unwanted. I think we need to go on the road with that show and get people under one tent to realize, we really are much more alike than we are different. And the whole diversity push has been to divide us. And we should really start meeting in the middle where we agree.
Yeah. And, I've always been really intrigued with different ideologies, and I don't look at different ideologies as the enemy. I don't look at somebody who, I've had Professor Richard Wolff on, who's kind of one of the faces of Marxism and
Right.
socialism. And I remember Charlie text messaged me, and it was a great reflection of his character and his open-mindedness. I mean, somebody who speaks at Anarcho-Poco and very much hangs out in the libertarian world. And yet he, for some reason, after I uploaded it, soon after, I get a text message from Charlie saying, he's like, "Hey, great show with Professor Richard Wolff." And I'm like, that's awesome that he was intrigued with, instead of just being like, "Hey, this guy is a idiot," or what. I mean, we have to, it's no different than being in a relationship, friendships, family, kids. Even if you disagree with somebody, we should strive to try to understand where they're coming from. And that's where, like, and I hate to use this left-right thing, because I don't, I've always been a politically homeless, and I
am now.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it's like, it reminds me of that movie Network, and I actually sampled it in a song years ago when I was still doing music. I put the sample from the part where he was in the meeting, and he's like, "There is no," I forget what he says, but then he's like, "There's only DuPont, and there's only this and that."
Right.
And basically making the
So
point,
great.
there is no ideologies. He's like, it's about money and power, and it doesn't. All the other things just help you get that money and power. And that's, and people have to understand that if you start understanding that, a lot of things start making a lot more sense. Even religion, for example, you look at historically, there's people who've used religion to control people, but those aren't people who really care about the religion or people
Right.
who really believe in it. I mean, it's like the 9/11 terrorists. They were supposedly uh at a strip club, or and like, very hardcore religious people, but they're at a strip club and drinking and partying it up, like before or a couple nights before or whatever. And I'm just like, these aren't people who believe in any of this. They're not even religious at all. They're people who basically were brainwashed into doing something, and then they use the religion as a tool to brainwash them. But that you see that over and over and over again, that the people that are supposedly examples of like, hey, look how horrible this ideology is, or that, like, they're not even people who truly believe in it.
Right.
No,
Yeah, they're the ones that are easiest to I think manipulate. People that are looking for, I think that they look for this though. I think these new what I'm seeing, somebody sent me some of the surveys that they're giving out before they hire teachers now that are so off the wall. And it's like, and they're choosing the opposite. If you and I saw the survey come out one way, we'd be like, I don't want that person anywhere near my child. But who's running our school system now, probably people that were passed down from the Poison Ivy League, they are like, wow, jackpot, we got that person, we can manipulate that person, we can make them sell, this divide and conquer, dumbing down, making our kids malleable. Because I don't think any of the stuff going on in the school is about LGBTQ or any of that. I think it's about making malleable, confused, easily manipulated next generation that will just go along with the status quo of the demons. And my opinion also about a lot of this is, I don't know if you see this, but I've been very critical from the very start. Actually, before it even happened, I've been critical since 2014 about Ukraine and what's going on there, and certainly when the stuff was coming out and the impeachment and everything. If you were saying something that was critical, that was honest about anything in the last year since this war, I guess people say that it started, but it started a long time ago. You were like a Russian asset or something. It's like, no, I'm looking at all the facts all the way back to the fall of the Soviet Union. I happen to have done my work, and I'm telling you right now that what's going on in Ukraine is a lie. And everything that's happening there was, I believe, pre-planned. It's up to anyone to do their own research, but a lot of it is BS. But here's the problem. I think somebody turned to me. I had on somebody who's great and really smart. He just happens to have a very different opinion of what's going on geopolitically. And a friend called me and said, that person's a communist. That person's siding with China and da, da, da. And I'm thinking, no, they're doing their research and they're coming up with their own opinion. And I love that guy, and I'm going to have him on again. So I don't know why you're calling me to tell me. But I do think that we, the people of the United States, at least, have to get out of the cognitive dissonance. You said before that it's like a relationship. Well, right now, I feel like we, the people, are in a very dysfunctional, abusive relationship with a government that has been getting away and lying to us for decades. And I just did a speech in Nashville where I said, they use reasons of national security, which the only reasons of national security should be, are they going to hurt we the people or our homeland? Other than that, if it's criminal behavior by a government or a CIA or FBI or whatever, that is not reasons of national security, and that should be adjudicated as every other thing. What I believe that where we are and how we got here is that all the crimes, probably before JFK, but let's just talk from JFK's murder forward, it has been one cover-up after another cover-up after another cover-up, keeping the same people in power, especially above our government. A lot of people think that those puppets and those elected, chosen, selected people have power, and I don't think they do. The power is above them, and it's like the military-industrial complex, senior executive service. But we have been so deceived, and every deception and another cover-up, and then all the Clinton cover-ups and all the 9/11 and then all the Benghazi, but there's so much more. There's just so many crimes. And yet the American people still, when confronted with all the evidence of our own government, especially with all the new whistleblowers from the FBI, I've had a couple of them on that are telling us way back, and if you go all the way back to Hoover, we have to start to admit, it's like when you go to AA or NA for the first time, and the first step is admitting you have a problem. I think we, the people of the United States, have to admit that we have a problem, and a lot of things have been done in the name of we, the people, with our money, our taxpayer dollars, that are very bad for not only this country, but the world. And until we start actually standing up and demanding transparency, truth, and justice, and I don't care which side you're on or who's involved, we're going to continue down this cycle of self-destruction by our own dime and our own complacency. And I really feel like the one thing that could save us all is to stand up and be adults and say, let's look at America and what we've done and how we can change this country from the inside out.
Yeah, and we do. And that's why the kids issue is so important, because that's how you start the brainwashing. You get them when they're young. Public schools are horrendous, and there's two problems. There's public schools, but there's also the problem that parents should be more involved.
Right.
This idea that people are like, no, it's okay that like kids are talking to their teachers about what gender they want to be, and it's like, no, the most important questions should be answered by the parents.
Right.
The most important conversations should be between the kids and the parents. I do not want a teacher having a personal conversation with my child and molding his perspective without me knowing. And I don't know where that teacher stands, in regards to the worldview. It might not be parallel with mine, and you're influencing that child, because when you're a child, you look at like teachers and coaches and all these people as
Right.
like, important, and you're told to respect them. So their opinions are really going to be important to you. And so it's like this idea that you just hand off your kid to the school system, and then you think like they're going to do all the work that historically parents have done, having the conversations, sitting down with like your older uncles and grandparents and asking them questions because you're a curious kid, and kind of extracting some of the wisdom from them. And it's wild. And this is a cultural thing. I remember that late night, he's a stand-up comedian too, the late night guy, Ferguson. He was Irish.
Oh yeah, Greg Ferguson.
Yeah, I remember somebody
He
sent
got kicked off of TV for something.
Did he?
He's still out there though. Yeah.
Somebody sent me a clip of him, or it might have been in a documentary a long time ago that I watched about him talk, and it was a really interesting perspective. He was talking about how one of the things that changed in our culture is that when he was growing up, you used to look at the elders as like the wise. They had wisdom. You respected them. You wanted to do, like I was mentioning, extract some wisdom, and you want to hear their stories and learn from their stories and learn from their life experiences, and which I think some of us still love doing, and that's why we love having these conversations and having podcasts, because you can learn from somebody else's experience. But culture has changed, where now we celebrate being young and reckless, and you celebrate, like, those are your idols. Those are the people you look up to. Those are your your icons. Those are the people that kids want to be. And it's a huge issue. We almost look like we look at our elders as like idiots, or like detached from reality. Like, oh, you don't understand the internet. You don't even know how to write an email. It's like,
yeah.
And so it's, and you look at like a lot of quotes, for example, a lot of times you could share a quote that's 100 years old, and people are like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And why is that? Because 100 years ago, we lived in a very different world materially. We lived in a very different world and looked very different. But it's because people haven't changed that much. And our environment has changed, the way we do things. We might have better, faster tools, but people inherently still desire the same things, want the same things, communicate the same way, look to be fulfilled the same way. So, and they know that. And now what you're doing is you're taking young kids, you're brainwashing them. You're also telling them that you're putting almost too much value in emotions, where it's just like, well, my kid wants to dress up as a tree.
Right.
Let him dress up as a tree. It's like, well, if it's all about emotions, and if that's the most important thing, and logic, and that's the thing, like most things, it's not black or white, it's somewhere in the middle. It's a gray area. Well, it's not all logic and no emotions, or all emotion and no logic. Like, it's somewhere in between. We have to understand that remember that we are still emotional creatures. Emotions are gonna change the way we look at things. Sorry, I dropped something. Change the way we look at things, and change just the way we perceive facts and evidence, because you can be biased, and that can affect, like, what am I accepting as fact or evidence, and what am I not. but we also can't go in completely in the other direction where it's like, well, I feel like climate change is something I should be fighting for, or I feel like, everybody should have a third bathroom. Like and not look at things logically. And the problem too is that a lot of these people who are passionate, they're so passionate that they're not capable of having a logical debate or conversation about it, where they get upset. And it's funny, like, because I repeat this saying all the time, and I'm sure you've heard it, like, if you don't have a heart when you're young, or yeah, right, how does it go, right? Like, if you're not, if you don't have a heart when you're young, you're liberal, and then if you don't have a, however it goes, and then it will later,
about when you're older, that you're conservative, right?
Conservative. So when you're young, you attract to that ideology and that thinking and that political party, because you assume they're the passionate people, they're the nice party, and the greedy old white guys on the right, like, they're the evil ones. And then, like, you become an adult and you meet liberals and conservatives, and you're like, I kind of feel like liberals are kind of jerks. I'm like, how was I convinced they're the nice people? And it's like, and it shows how when you're young, you can get so passionate about like these topics. I was motivated after September 11th with the anti-war movement. Geopolitics was like a big focus of my research and things I would talk about. And I was so anti-war, and war was really like almost the perfect example that, like, there are no parties, because it's like everybody's for war, regardless what ideology and party you're with. But I was like, I always talked about Dick Cheney and Hollenberg and KBR and DuPont and all. So, and then it got to a point where you're like, okay, well, I keep demonizing one party, and I'm like, I can't forget that the left is equally as responsible and just equally as bad. But when you're young and you're such a emotional creature, then it becomes a problem. You can be easily manipulated, you can be easily swayed in one direction or another, and all logic goes out the window. That's why I've heard somebody say that, like, the voting age should be like 30.
It should.
Not a bad idea, because when you think about, like, okay, when you're young, you're a little bit more emotional. When you're older, you're a little bit more logical. Like, 30 might be a good in between, where it's like, okay, I've been through some life. I've been in the real world, so I see it from an employer's perspective and an employee's perspective. I see it from I'm still young enough where I can relate to people that are younger and the things that they're interested in. It might be a good in between age. Like, I think 18-year-olds, if you can't, to me, like, 18-year-olds, like, you can just be easily swayed in one direction or another.
Oh yeah. And that these people that I don't, especially the Democratic Socialists of America, if people don't know who they are, they should look into it, because they are not for this nation, and they are, whether you like it or not, if you look what they're doing, they are straight up communists, and they seem to forget that communism benefits the oligarchy, billionaire, trillionaire class that I believe has usurped this nation from top to bottom. But the one thing that I want to say from the other side is I grew up in a home that was very conservative. My dad was, even though he voted for Perot, I'm super close with my father. He's very, very he was 30 years in Coast Guard Auxiliary. Really, like, as always, like, we took trips. Our trips growing up were to, like, war museums and stuff. And I'd be like, why aren't we at a beach? But that was my life. And I'll tell you, it was a real rude awakening when I started digging in to, because I didn't know necessarily until I started actually looking into it, that I firmly believe that both Bushes, Clinton, and Obama are all on the same team. I think every one of those elections was set up to end how it ended. And the truth of the matter is, I think that this plan to end America as we know it, you can even look at the World Economic Forum or any other UN, our common agenda. They basically say they're done with nation states and borders and sovereignty of nations, that no longer works for these globalist billionaire, trillionaire class. And, it's hard to look back and see that, because I talk a lot recently about that Rumsfeld-Cheney Center for New American Century document that came out in 2000 before 9/11, and everything that happened since, because in that document, which the American people were not privy to, did not know about, it is almost sickening reading it. You feel like they're the Death Star and they're going to take over the planet. And it's like, nobody voted for that. That's not where anyone wanted their money. They wanted our money to make our country better, not to go take over the planet. And if you look at that and what happened since and all these wars, it's really sad because I was talking to a very high up general that's been involved in a lot of these wars, and he looks back with shame. And he's not alone, and believes that everything that happened since 9/11, the biggest crime against we the people of the United States was the passing of the Patriot Act, in my opinion. But I firmly believe that the last 22 years of war has been about nothing but power and money for the social elitists and the globalists, and that it has been one after another power and money grab of our country, our middle class, our fortune that should have been reinvested. It's still happening now. And somehow they are able to manipulate a good portion of the United States to back every single one of these color revolutions that you can trace to the same, again, 10 billionaires that are aligned with the World Economic Forum and the Davos crew and the UN. And, you're talking about emotion and compassion. Well, the UN and all of their agendas, and of course, the worst of the worst, the IMF and everything that they do all around the world, they convince us is for good, for benevolence, they play on our compassion for these nations and these people. And in your heart that if you really look at everything, that's a total lie. That really they're convincing us to allow them to keep this total top-down power that is keeping the world stuck. And it's perpetuating war, where if every country took back their power, we got rid of these globalist institutions that have infiltrated all of our nations. Every nation was allowed to succeed on its own. The puppet masters that put in the puppets were exposed and removed, and every nation actually put their nation first and built their nation up from their own natural resources and their own abilities. And we all shared together that we have a lot better chance going forward. That's why a lot of people now on the outside are talking about dismantling the entire globalist stronghold overlords and finding a way to have all sovereign nations involved. This whole globalism, there's no nations, we're global citizens, is a fraud. If it was every nation being the best they are and proud and standing tall and sharing their abilities with others, I believe that most people of the 8 billion people on planet Earth would prefer a life like that, where their own nation was thriving and therefore sharing and helping other nations grow and thrive in a common way. We'd be in a lot better place. And I still believe that's possible, but not until we, the people of the United States, are honest about our history, what part we've played, and how and who's involved, and start. You got to pick the root at the core and destroy it. And it's all the same people, back to Rockefeller, Brzezinski, Kissinger, and everyone that they've groomed since then. And another thing you brought up about school and all of that, my mom's 81 and she's gotten together. She was a teacher for decades, and she's gotten together with a bunch of other grandparents in her community. And what they do is they find out what history books and science books and stuff they're giving out in the school district. And they go through them, and there's a group that you can say. And what my mom and her friends are finding is they go through these history books, and they're doing elementary and middle school and high school, is that a lot of the history, especially I think this was done during the Obama years, has been erased and rewritten, and a lot of things that would prevent future problems, children aren't being taught the truth about, and yet they're being taught that things that aren't true happened. So, where you're going back to education, that's the same, but that's also for us adults. We should all be going back and looking at many things. JFK forward is where I've been going, but it goes way back to the First World War. But all of these wars, as a friend of mine said, are bankers' wars. They go in, they pay both sides to have a war, and the bankers and the contractors and the military-industrial complex benefit greatly after the wars, which they have a Marshall Plan already in place for, which created the EU with a bunch of, the same characters for Ukraine. But that Marshall Plan for Ukraine, it was written in 2019. So, I just think we have to stop playing along with the idea that that we're fighting for non-existent democracies or for developing nations, and be honest that that's not really what's happening, and we're allowing it.
Yeah, the PNAC thing is when you get into the that world, and you look at 9/11 and you look at PNAC, and then you look at like how they wrote that Project for a New American Century would talk about how they needed a new Pearl Harbor, and that Italian documentary filmmaker who's been on my show a bunch and also has been on the Union of the Unwanted, has one of the best documentaries on 9/11 called 9/11 A New Pearl Harbor, and that's why
Right.
that. And he really starts off by going historically by showing examples of false flag events and how they lied to you about what happened and how they would use a event to get the public angry and deceive them, and or to use the event to get into a war or whatever it may be, which is kind of what happened after 9/11. When you look at 9/11, it's like, even if you believe the official story, how do you make sense of the fact that if you wanted justice for what you truly believed, was a event that happened the way the mainstream media tells you it happened, even though even there's plenty of people on the 9/11 Commission report that openly talked about it being rigged, and there's plenty. I mean, you can watch the documentary. One of the best ones on the topic is called Press for Truth, which is about the Jersey girls, the Jersey widows, who the four of them, and I think like two or three of them voted for Bush, and they wanted a investigation, and there was no investigation. They're the ones who forced the government into investigating and doing that fake investigation
Right.
into it. But it's not conspiratorial at all. Press for Truth is one of the best documentaries on the topic because it shows that regardless what happened, there was a cover up and there's
Right.
a lack of investigation of the topic. So, I mean, that's a weird thing, is that they openly talk about these things. Project for New American Century. I mean, all these think tanks, World Economic Forum. I mean, you can find just podcasts and conferences and meetings and videos of them openly talking about what the next plan is, and
Right.
people just don't care, and that's a little bit deceiving. But the whole system is rigged. I mean, there's that HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy, which showed how easily the machines could be manipulated, and how, if in I think in one part of the documentary they showed that regardless how many votes this machine would be inputted, they already had the percentage that would go to one person, the percentage that would go to the other, predetermined
Oh
regardless.
yeah.
They openly showed you this on the documentary, and you look at historically, there's always been fuckery with elections. I mean, it goes all the way back. We brought up JFK. I mean, there's obviously all those rumors about like dead people voting for JFK and all this stuff. I mean, and we both have talked to Roger Stone. I mean, Roger Stone will tell you, the methods he uses politics is a dirty game, and it's that's just kind of the way it goes. Like, they're going to use everything in their power,
Right.
every
Yeah.
resource, every favor possible to try to get what they want, more power, and it doesn't matter how they go about it. So, that's one thing that people have to understand, is that it's been rigged. It's always been rigged, and you can't trust these people. And people who still think that like the government can save you and protect you, well, they can only save you and protect you, and you only need saving and protecting typically from them. But either way, like, a lot of these boogeymen are created by them. Like, they scare the crap out of you, and then it's problem, reaction, solution. It's like they create
Right.
the problem, and then they want you to go to them for the solution. And I don't know if you know documentary filmmaker. He's from Australia, but I was a big fan of his work back in the day. John Pilger. He
Sounds
amazing
familiar.
documentary filmmaker, but he did tons of documentaries on a lot of the coups in like Nicaragua and
Oh
Guatemala,
yeah.
and all the us, the history of us being involved
It's
in
horrible.
the mid, and like all the elections that we've been involved in.
Right.
Also, the film, what the hell it's called? Uh, it's about Henry Kissinger. The Trials of
Oh.
Henry Kissinger. It was a book by Christopher Hitchens, and then it was also, and I'm not always a big fan of all Christopher Hitchens' work, but
Well, you can't be. He's all over the place, but I love him too. Anyway.
yeah, but the documentary shows how every single conflict that Christopher Hitchens, or that Henry Kissinger was involved in, every geopolitical a decision he made had
Right.
a hidden agenda, and at the time you didn't know, but afterwards you
Right.
find out there was. And that's also why I get why, like, I've heard Pasta say this. You talked about Pasta and on AM Wake Up, and he'll say from time to time about, like, when people talk about the Chinese and like, oh, the communism, and he's like, I get why people from the left would be a little afraid of that, because historically you have seen them use that term. A lot of those coups in South America, Latin America, were justified by saying we're fighting communism. Same thing with Vietnam, because we're fighting.
Or now we have the opposite. We're fighting for democracy where one doesn't exist. They use whatever and then they manipulate it. I firmly believe that all these color revolutions, that's what I see what you're talking, in my opinion, that's what I call these things. And they also start with our CIA, our National Endowment for Democracy, MI5 and MI6, the Crown, all the same players, always Kissinger before he died, Brzezinski, we're always in the background, Council of Foreign Relations. But the truth is, I believe that America right now is in the middle of a color revolution executed by the same people. It has nothing to do with Trump or Biden or any of that BS. What it has to do with is capturing this country and the people. And they've done a very good job thus far, though I think a lot of people are waking up. What I'm currently looking at and find odd and I'm a little nervous about is that Blinken and Blinken, a total globalist, everyone in there, Rice, Powers, we got all these people in the background, Sullivan, Newland and her husband that were involved in the Maidan Revolution, a lot of color revolutions. The problem right now is that this very small group of elitists, American oligarchy, I call them, they seem to be aligned with this goal of the World Economic Forum and the no nation states and the globalists, the globalism, and the bankers are much better at running the world than we are. And, let's just stop these people from thinking they have control. The problem is that Blinken and Biden went early on, or not Biden, but Blinken and his friends. And, his family's very close with Soros. Soros is Color Revolutionary University in the EU. Library is the Blinken Library because Anthony Blinken's parents paid for it, donated it. So we have to understand he's been in that mix a long time. They went to the UN to assess America and our systematic racism and our violence. And they're losing on all fronts, this globalist regime that's trying to destroy all free nations so they can control all our resources and money and everything. I think they're losing now. And what I fear is something called responsibility to protect, which is how, they can call it communism or saving democracy. But at the end of the day, if they want the UN and the world to declare world war, they oftentimes, or a war that's backed by the world, they say that they have the responsibility to protect. It was really became real when power was in the UN, Obama was president, and George Soros was behind the scenes with the Open Society. A lot of these wars that happened, Libya, Yugoslavia, all the color revolutions, all over Africa, South America, usually that's the last straw. And I'm very worried right now with the amount of shootings and the amount of chaos and the amount of, and this is all coming orchestrated through the borders and also through a lot of legislation, getting rid of cops, making our country so violent that we are on the verge of these people being so desperate, these globalist, elitist, oligarchy types, to stick with the globalism plan, the UN One World Agenda plan that they have upcoming, that they are going to call a responsibility to protect in America over our violence. And there's something going on with all of these shootings. This is not normal. This is new. And when I see these people being triggered, and I've dealt with a lot of people that were MK Ultra, including Kathy O'Brien, who's a very good friend of mine. I was just with her this week. This looks very much like a setup for them to call responsibility to protect, which Obama set up for that to be able to happen. And our country to, believe me, I think if that happened, we, the people of the United States, would rise up in massive numbers if they tried to, pull that here. But that's what they've gotten away with. And I think people should be really looking at what's really going on with the uptick in violence and shootings and mass casualty events every single day. This is off the charts. And if you look at some of the things they're talking about that the US and the National Endowment for Democracy and CIA have orchestrated all over the world, it has a very similar pattern to where we are right now. And we have to be vigilant and reject this nonsense and fight back.
Well, I mean, think about it. Prior to 2020, there was a lot of people who were overworked, stressed, barely making it. And then you had the news who was just telling you that, the world's going to overheat and we're all going to die, and that races don't like each other and cops are going to, shoot you every time you get pulled over, and like just constant stress and stress and stress. And I think this could be a symptom of the COVID lockdowns and all the things that happen and all the stress that the media and the TV and the politicians put on the public for a while. I mean, to think that there's not some long lasting effect of all this, if somebody was at the edge of breaking, they were probably pushed over the edge, after the stuff. I mean, you have to assume so, and also prescription drugs. That's another thing. Tom Cruise was right. Oprah, there's a great documentary. It's funny because I'll still suggest it, even though I know who funded it, or at least one of the people that funded it. But there's this documentary years ago, because I would talk about the DSM and psychological drugs and how it's not scientific at all. They don't even do any tests to check which chemicals imbalance, but yet they'll tell you that you're dealing with a chemical imbalance. And so what happens is that there's this documentary called Making a Killing. And I would suggest it over and over again. And I don't know if a listener told me or I just did some research and found myself, but I believe there's some group that funded it that has links to Scientology. And then at first I'm like, what the fuck? I can't keep talking about this documentary. I'm like, it might be funded by some Scientology group. And then I'm like, but they were right. And then there's speakers in there that have been on my show that, are making really valid points. I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. They were just right. I mean, I guess.
Yeah. They're very against, Scientology is very against psychiatry. They've always been. He was very against psychiatry. Listen, there's good and bad. Listen, there are people. I have a good friend. It's hard to watch. She has terrible schizophrenia. When she's on drugs, she's fine. When she's not, you can't even talk to her. It's nonsensical. So there's cases, but the amount, my sister's a psychopharmacologist and a psychiatrist, an MD for children, and she resists putting anyone on drugs. And if it's on drugs, it's got to be a plan to put them on to stabilize them and get them off. And that stopped being when the pharmaceutical industry made it such a business. And plus, when they went off the patents and it went into generics, I mean, this all those drugs like flew off the shelves. We have to really re-examine what that's all about now. Also, in the shadow of COVID, we can't deny it. But like I said, there's an executive order that the unconstitutional education department under Joe Biden just put out to put all these counselors in schools that can recommend psychiatric drugs for our children without going through a doctor. And we really have to be vigilant of that. And I think that's really important for people to understand that these psychiatric drugs are meant to, a lot of them are meant to control and to keep, also to make a lot of money. And you're right. And we have to be vigilant. I unfortunately have to go because I'm about to speak to a prisoner that's been in the gulag in DC from the DC jail. I have to catch him because he's calling me from prison. But I just wanted to thank you so much, and we can continue the conversation. But I want everyone out there to please look into what's going on for these people that are being held in January 6th also, please, because it's really sad.
Awesome. Thanks, Mel K. I really appreciate
Thank you.
all the work you're doing. Good luck with your next interview. Hopefully I see you tonight. And
yeah, you will.
And I'll pull.
And you'll be on my show next week. So we'll continue from there. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ricky. I love being on. Appreciate it.